Hi, welcome to Crafted Sweetly. I'm Diana. Thanks so much for being here. If you do book folding or photo book art, you know that generally you're using a hardcover book. And I've done like one video, I believe, that where I used the paperback, and that was to turn it into a vase. So I'll link that video below. But in this video, I wanted to show you how to turn your paperbacks into hardbacks, basically. So you can start using the paperbacks and upcycle those instead of just using the hardbacks. And I have a paperback here, and then what I have are two pieces of, it's like a heavier cardboard. I guess it's a chipboard. I'll link this in the description box below as well if you're interested in, turning your paperbacks into hardbacks. And I'm using my Caterpillar Pro for this one so that I can trim this chipboard, this, heavier cardboard, I guess. I'm not sure if it's chipboard or just heavy cardboard. And I'm not exactly sure. I believe this is a 2mm one for the thickness. So again, it's linked below. And then the other thing that I'm going to use is art glitter glue. In spite of the name art glitter, there's no glitter in it, but this is my go-to glue pretty much for everything, just because it dries clear. I love it. It's an excellent glue. So what I'm first going to do is I'm going to put this chipboard here and on the spine as well as in the back. So I'm kind of turning this into, going all the way around. Now I don't have a chipboard big enough to go all the way around this paperback. Now if the paperback was smaller, as in, not as many pages, or where you can get out of one piece, you can cover the entire book, I would take this and then score it in the various places. So I would score it there and then score it here and then cut it off. So that's what I would do with smaller one. But this one, since for book folding, which you could probably get this in a bigger piece and then do the same thing what I'm about to do just by scoring it. But for this, what I'll do is I'm going to actually cut 3 pieces. So two a front, a back, and then the spine, which I'm all going to glue together. And you can cut them exactly the size of the cover if you'd like, or make it a little bigger. That's another option. So what I'm going to do first actually is do the spine. So I'm going to hold the book up right along, this part here at the bottom, and mark it with a pencil. That's all I'm going to do. So that's the thickness of my spine. At this point, I'm going to cut this, which is the spine. And unfortunately, although the Caterpillar has the light, this is so thick, it doesn't go through it. So for this, I would just, go by the line that I drew on here, and the light doesn't really do anything. And I cut that part. Now, this is going to be trimmed. So there's right there on the spine. And I'm going to trim this right where it ends. Make sure this is flush. And same, I'm marking it with a pencil to cut that off. Okay, so that's my spine here. And for the book, the front and the back, I'm just going to put the book right on here. So I'm going to mark the book onto the chipboard the same exact way as I did the spine. So, whoops, make sure it's even on all sides here, and I'm just marking off the line. So there's one, and mark the other one, or the front and the back. So this way we can cut a straight line. It's more this side that I need to be to know where to stop. So I'm just gonna do this here, because that's gonna continue on here when I cut it. And if I do it flush against the top of the cutter right here, then that should be straight. take off this little piece and then cut it in half basically. And let me do it from here down so I can have some light here so I know exactly what I'm cutting. Okay, that's all it took to cut these out, the front, back, and the spine. Where's the spine? Here we go. Okay, so at this point I'm just gonna glue these onto the book. And I would probably go in order, so I would do the back, or the front I should do probably as the first one. The front, the back. Now this would require that you do some kind of covering for the book. So sometimes you may leave the cover as is and then just cover the spine if it's a hardcover. But for this, since we're doing it with chipboard, this is something that you would definitely want to cover, whether it's with decoupage, adding a napkin. I've done a video on that. And you could, you know, kind of decorate the chipboard with this. Before or after gluing it, I would probably do it after. But you can decorate this, paint it, do all kinds of things with it, with the design on here. Your imagination is the only limit. So I have my art glitter glue here, and I'm gonna go right by the edge because I don't want to make sure that that's not coming loose right there, or that's glued down right, and a little bit in the middle. Okay. Make sure this is flush, and this is going to require that you leave it alone like overnight to make sure that this, you know, adheres properly and it's glued down and it's not going to shift. So I wouldn't start working on this book to add strips to it or cutting it or anything like that. Okay, now let me do this side. Let's see. I will do the spine. And as you can see, I'm doing a very thin bead. It doesn't require a lot with art glitter glue. And you can still shift it once you put it on there if you need to. But do press it down properly. And I would probably put it under something heavy overnight just to press it really well. I'd say a phone book, but that's not the case anymore. I don't think you're gonna find the phone book. But something heavy is what you want to put on top of it, just to make sure that this is glued down. And this will open a whole slew of opportunities for you to use paperbacks. And that way you're not tied to always having to use a hardcover for your designs. Look at that. Looks nice and new, and now you could cover this book if you need to, if you want to cover it with a, like I said, with a napkin or paint it or whatever. So I'm pressing it from all directions. I set it down this way to make sure that it's you know, attached properly, and then I would just leave it alone. So it's, at this point, it's like a hardcover. This is heavy. You could get the chipboard thicker if you really wanted to, if you want to make it extra thick, but I think this would work just fine. Now make sure this is, if you find that some area, that's why you want to make sure that you go all the way to the edge with the glue to make sure that this kind of gap doesn't happen. I can go back and just add just a little more glue right there. And I'm gonna press it down in this direction to make sure it stays. And since I don't have a phone book for this, what I'm gonna do is I'm going to put something on top of it. This is not quite heavy enough, so I'm gonna add my 24-pound paper. Let me get the caterpillar from underneath just so I don't have all this weight on top of the Caterpillar. At this point my book is dry and nice hard cover to it. I mean, this is, you know, as pretty much close to as a regular hardcover. And you can paint it at this point. It probably wouldn't, you don't need to leave it. If you're using art glitter glue, probably a couple of hours would be fine. You don't really need to leave it overnight, because this, I checked it after a couple of hours and it's completely fine. So no need to wait overnight. And then at this point you can decorate this as you wish, and then proceed to do the photo strips or do your cutting on the book. Now at this point you could leave it as is while you're working on it and do just some simple decorating afterwards, or you could decorate it beforehand. So what I'm doing here, I've done another one where I was kind of using decoupage. I'm using Mod Podge. You can use a roller, you can use a napkin, a brush. And what I'm gonna do is I'm using a brush here, but then I'll use almost like a squeegee to make sure that the napkin is even. I didn't have another roller, or I would have used the roller to kind of get even distribution on this, but the brush seems to be working okay. Okay, that's the top. And what I did was I took a napkin, and they're usually multi-ply napkins. This was 2-ply, so I just took that extra ply like this. This was another ply of the napkin. I took that off, and now I'm just gonna align this. Let's see how I can align this to make sure I'd use the corner right there. And if I follow this top edge, the other should follow as well. So that's right there, and right along the top one. So now I want to make sure that this is laying as flat as possible. And as I mentioned, you can use a credit card, you can use a squeegee. I'm using bone folder here. You can use that as well, just to kind of give it a smooth, you know, press to make sure that this is pressed down. A little bit of Mod Podge on the spine. And I didn't do it right off the bat on the spine because I didn't want it to catch the napkin. And now you'll see it's pretty easy to get the coverage here, because I'm just gonna roll the book over and press it, and it's already done on that side. And then I'll do this side here. So this is a larger napkin, which is sufficient to cover the whole book. If you need to use, like, because the napkins are smaller, you need to do a couple, then you could do the front and then the back, and obviously, you know, the spine. So try it out and see what works. You don't want a coat that's too thick, because that'll make the napkin soften up too much, or, you know, like possibly tear the napkin. So you want just a thin layer of the Mod Podge. And I'm going with the streaks all in the same direction here. And now one more roll of the book. I want to make sure that this is, before I make it go flat, you know, like lay it down, I want to make sure that the napkin is stretched out as much as possible, and then set it down right there. And same thing here, I want to make sure that I'm getting air bubbles out, and then I'm just gonna run the bone folder across. You could use a credit card or plastic, or like the Cricut scraper, plastic scraper, whatever you have to get this smooth out, to make sure that it's smooth. That's done. Front is done, so now it's a matter of cutting this off. I like to use scissors just because an X-Acto knife might tear the napkin. So I'm kind of roughly cutting it right now here, just so that I'm not working with such a huge piece. And then I can go back and cut right along the edge of the napkin right there. Right along the edge of the book. Okay, and same thing with these. Just cut this off all around. You can also use a lighter. Just make sure, and you can see it's following the edge of the book. Just make sure you are doing this where you're not going to set off the sprinkler in your house. So that trimmed it right along the edge. So that's another option to do if you're using the napkin on the book. You do want to make sure you don't set the book on fire. So that's all trimmed there. And the top. Now, as you can see, it's slightly curling because I used the Mod Podge on it right there. So what you want to do is you want to lay this flat. This would be an overnight thing until the Mod Podge dries. So this, you want to make sure that it is flat for this, so it doesn't do this. As you can see, it kind of bows out. So you want to make sure that this stays flat. Okay? And then you can do your photo book art pages. So after I covered the book and I showed you how I did the decoupage on here, I also wanted to do the front of it just to show you what it looks like, so that it works totally fine using a paperback. And then on the bottom, it is reinforced with a stabilizing cardboard. I have a video on how to do it. I can certainly do one for a paperback. I did it a little different than I did for the hardcovers, just because the cardboard is usually flush versus on the cover, on the hardcover books where you have the cover larger than the, taller than the pages. So happy to show you that as well. But here is the book on a paperback. So opens up a whole world of possibilities. You can use a paperback to create really beautiful designs as well, and then just use decoupage to cover them, to cover the chipboard that you use for it. Because I used Mod Podge for it, it does have a slight curl to it. I haven't tried a different adhesive, maybe like with the Xyron machine, where you add kind of glue everywhere and it's not a wet glue. That may work where it's, like adhesive to it, and you wouldn't get this slight bow. But it's actually not that bad. I mean, even looking from the top, you can see the slight bow there, but it really doesn't bother me. I think the book turned out great using a paperback. I hope this video will help in giving you more possibilities as far as books at your disposal to create patterns. If you have any questions, comment below. If you start using paperbacks, please post them. Would love to see your work. Thanks so much for watching. This pattern will be available in my Etsy shop. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.